I love hunting bedding areas. And when I'm hunting a morning stand, sometimes I hunt cruising areas. That's during the rut. Can even make a case for some of those cruising areas during the early season because you're not in necessarily right at a bedding area and you're not on a food source. It's a long transition area. Deer are going back to bedding. They're coming from distant food sources. They travel through some open fields, some open hardwoods, and then they get back into some thick stuff. And you're right on that transition point where you're not spooking out a bedding area. I like that because you can chip away at those areas in the early season. When it comes to when I'm killing a large percentage of mature bucks, it's in their bedding areas in the morning. I love that kind of hunting. I had someone make a comment this morning, well, we're in the East Coast. We have a lot of hunters and we have a lot of deer, so it doesn't work to hunt morning areas. Now, I would say you don't set it up. It's an art. It's something you have to plan for. It's something that you can't have random habitat improvement. I think traditional habitat improvement really destroys most opportunities for hunting morning bedding areas because you try to make the most of every property. So if this is your property right here, you're improving every square inch of it for whatever kind of feature there is. Food, this is an open field, so we're improving that. We're patchwork, timber management, clear cuts. Ends up happening is, it doesn't matter if that's 160 acres or 40 or 20, you can't step foot on the land because you don't know where deer are going to be. You don't have dedicated food sources, dedicated bedding areas. It's almost harder to do it on public land. Easier to do it on public land in cases like that because then you can find these giant clear cuts. You can find areas where the timber hasn't been improved. And then you know where deer are feeding and where they're not, where they're bedding. You can make some good, reasonable assumptions if you have good woodsmanship skills and if you have experience. A lot of people have a very difficult time hunting morning stand locations and opportunities because if they're managing their own private land, it's too random. Food sources aren't concentrated. You don't have depth of cover. So you don't have that depth that a mature buck needs to even live on your land. So where do you go in the morning? It's all random. So you're waiting until the deer are back to bed in the morning and then you're going into, quote, non-deer areas where you don't think they're going to be and sitting down and waiting for them to come out of their beds. That doesn't mean that you know more about deer hunting and so evening's better. It just means the property you're hunting, the hunt you designed for yourself on public land isn't in depth enough to be able to take advantage of morning hunting because deer move several times more during the morning hours than they do afternoon during the rut. And that's scientific. They've looked at that where deer will actually be movement and more mobile for the morning hours. We typically, that sweet spot where I'm shooting mature bucks in the morning is between 2 and 4 hours after daylight. There's sometimes I've had some of my best sits ever, meaning total number of bucks seen, does, mature bucks, and I won't have seen a deer for an hour, hour and a half of first daylight because I'm getting back far enough away from the food sources and allowing those mature bucks to come back to me. And if you have random food sources, you don't have your hunt where they should be in the morning around food, and you can sneak in around and have a backdoor access. It takes some planning, then you're not going to be able to have that morning hunt. Morning hunting bedding areas is an incredible opportunity. Learn this art. I tell people it accounts for 70% of my bucks, even though it accounts for probably 15% of my total sits for the entire year, because we plan for these morning hunts and we don't spoil it out by over hunting. When does this really begin? Bedding area opportunity for me begins in the pre-rut. Around here, that's somewhere around the 25th of October. If it's super warm on the 25th, cold on the 22nd, I might take a bedding area sit on the 22nd. If it's warm on the 25th and it's getting cold on the 28th might be my first opportunity for a bedding morning sit. What we find is when you have those colder morning temperatures, bucks are a lot more active in that pre-rut time within that given bedding area. They're actually moving further on a linear distance than they are just standing up, feeding in one location, making a couple rubs and scrapes and never moving out of a shoebox area. They're actually expressing that same amount of movement over a longer period, in a longer linear period where they're moving from point A to point B and back, and they might go by 2 or 3 stands in a bedding area, and it's an incredible opportunity. For us, it's around October 25th up here in southeast Minnesota, southwest Wisconsin, maybe southern to central Michigan, over into New York, especially the southern half of New York, maybe northern portions of Pennsylvania. over in the Dakotas. But you're seeing that pre-rut to start to take place in that time. Now, what I find in more southerly areas, if you're in Tennessee, over into West Virginia, even Louisiana, as long as you're not in areas where deer are being bred because it's warm enough for 3 to 4 months out of the year pretty evenly, you actually have an intense first primary rut, then you're going to see this up to 2 weeks after. So it might be your pre-rut begins the 5th of November, maybe even the 10th if you're in Louisiana, where that peak rut is sometime about a week after that, where you go through pre-rut. There's actually those first does starting to come into estrus at that time. Then you get a rut lockdown because there's an enormous amount of does being bred and almost every buck gets invited to the party. And then you have primary rut set in. And to me, that first pre-rut period lasts for about a week. And then it goes into lockdown, and then you have that primary rut begin. So you can just pick your time frame for when this hunting opportunity begins. But for us, that means in about 3 or 4 days, sometime around to Friday. Dylan, what's the date Friday?
The 24th.
24th, it's supposed to be 33 degrees in the upper 20s, right around there, depending on where we're at in the southwest Wisconsin, southeast Minnesota. And that should be a slammer of a day to go sit and enjoy the pre-rut in some rut cruising funnel stand. It's also one of the first quiet mornings that we've had without excessive wind. It's coldest temperatures of probably one of the coldest of this short hunting season already. And it's going to be a great opportunity. I want to point this out. When you're hunting these bedding areas, always think about you have that food source right here. Then you have a layer of doe bedding, a layer of young bucks, and a layer of old bucks. What is that distance from food to back here? It depends on where you're located. If you're in a wilderness setting, big wood setting, Kentucky hardwoods, Pennsylvania hardwoods, northern Minnesota, that distance could be up to 800 yards or more. There's a gray area there. However, if you're in northern Ohio, that might be 150 yards, where there's no cover and deer are used to being compacted. So it depends on what your area is, and it's a sliding scale. But rest assured, if you don't have this layer, whatever that distance is, he won't be there. You can't say, well, we just have too many deer. Because if you develop depth of cover or you find it on public land, maybe you have too much food on your 100 acres or your 20 acres or your 40 acres. You have to provide some depth. And that depth has to be equal to this distance right here. If you don't, you're not going to have those mature bucks. And you're not going to have mature buck bedding area. You're just hunting young buck bedding area. Hopefully a mature buck will come through because it's middle of the rut. I want to have the opportunity to hunt the entire rut in morning areas, the entire second rut in morning areas. And that's when my opportunities go through the roof. Because you're hunting a time where they're moving around a lot during cold hours in the morning. And it's just during that certain time of the year, pre-rut, rut lockdown, post-rut, second rut, and that's when I hunt those mornings, other than maybe opening day of gun season, opening day of muzzleloader, or something like that. But that's that layering effect right here. And so I'm only going to choosing, you have this time frame right here, but again, just like I said, if ours begins on 10/24, I'm going to go in on 10/21 if it's a cold front. If it's warm on the 24th, I might go on the 28th if that's the cold front, the 27th. But we see that on our trail cameras. We have over 50 cell cameras running right now, and it's pretty stark. We're not just making things up. When there's bad weather, they don't move. When there's good weather, they move. It's pretty easy. And Dylan, he's sitting behind the camera right now, and he has a bunch of cell cameras out. Dylan, do you have 5?
I'd rather not say. I think I got like 30 running right now.
Yeah. And on multiple properties.
Yeah.
And so you don't, you see a flurry on one property because of one buck or something, but typically across the board, you see deer moving in both states, all properties.
It's so awesome, and my buddy Unger's logged in on mine as well, and it's like all of a sudden the cameras come alive and our texts come alive because it's like, oh my gosh, what's got him up and moving right now?
Yeah.
Pretty awesome to watch. And
at the same time, like I still, when I was blown away, not only did we sit in bad rain the other day, we're going to do it again today, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I think today it's going to stay drier.
Well, we're
I
going
really
to set
do.
blinds. That actually sounds pretty good. My cameras will appreciate that.
Extremely high wind.
Yep.
So between wind and rain, you can see that day, I think when we sat, we didn't have a deer move for an hour and a half.
Right.
And
at the beginning of the set, they were moving, though, so we were...
When it was not raining.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it started raining, we didn't have a deer. And then that night, we woke up to around 10 deer pictures on over 50 cell cameras. So it rained all night. It was windy all night. And so for people to see weather doesn't influence deer movement, that just means they don't have enough cell cameras. Because if you did, you'd learn a lot more about deer and you wouldn't make those comments. Instead, you look at the scientific research and say, and we talk about this in another video, but you look at it and say, why doesn't the research match what actually happens in the field? That's what a true scientist does. But if they're not in the field to see this all the time, they're not going to see it. So we get to see that with our trail cameras, and it's the same thing. I'm not going to go into a bedding area stand with high winds, extreme temperatures, thunderstorms, lightning, or blizzard conditions, just to name a few. Not going to do it. It doesn't make any sense. And I even think, Dylan, I haven't even talked to you about this, something I've been contemplating in my head or kind of go over and over. The scientific research is all done on large properties. Large commercial holdings, large public land holdings, big acreage, and telemetry studies where they can collar deer and watch them all over the place. Deer are more free in those conditions to move here and there, regardless. They're not worried about hunting pressure too much because they're out in the middle of the forest. They might even be a mile away from hunting pressure. There's not a lot of people. We go out to Pennsylvania and we're hunting a 3 by 10 mile area, and there might be 20 cars parked around that entire place on opening day. We might see 100, no hunter, 2 hunters on opening day, and that's it. And we're way out in the middle of the forest. There's areas of pockets of deer out there that don't even see another 100 during gun season. So if they feel free to stand up, browse around wherever they want, there because food sources are further apart, they're less concentrated, then to me they're going greater distances. They have no hunting pressure in areas, so that's skewing the results. Where if you have more moderately pressured private land to high pressured, then deer are even more stocked into not moving, and then moving when the conditions are good, not moving when the conditions are bad.
Sure. Yeah.
I think there's more risk associated with it's windy, they can't hear, they can't see when things are blowing around, rain's coming, fog. Fog's another one. They don't move that great deer in fog either. Mm-hmm. So the conditions to me on small properties where they don't do studies lends itself.
Yeah,
but
makes sense.
But when you get into hunting to bedding areas, I'm going in, usually my toes are getting cold. Dylan was even talking about putting a heated vest on for the first time on a Friday morning. I don't blame him. But you want weather with this. This is when it begins it, and then I'm hunting all rut. I'm hunting all rut in the morning when I can, when those conditions. I'm gonna wait. I want to take, several really good, and you might, the cool thing is with rutting, if you got into your favorite stand, you didn't spook anything in or out, and the winds were good, then, hit it again the next day, if that's where you think it's going to happen. The second rut, if you think about that primary rut, think about this starts, and then about a week after that, so for us around November 1st, fast forward 30 days, that's when that second rut is. And that's a percentage of does, it might be 20%, 10%, 15% that aren't bred. We don't hunt 1-to-1 ratio herds where everything's bred in the beginning. When you have high pressure, there's more of a second rut to me because there'll be pockets of does and fawns that are not hit because bucks just frankly don't move that much. When it's abnormally hot weather, John Azoga, deer research biologist, he said that, of course, moon, weather doesn't affect the timing of when does are bred. It's the same. They did research for up to 30 years, deer road kills, doe kills. They could see the exact date of conception with ultrasound. They studied that for decades, and there's no difference from one year to the next, moon, weather, anything. However, the amount of activity during daylight is greatly diminished or increased by weather. So if it's really hot, really windy rut, well, the rut's still going to take place. It's going to take place at night. In that case, too, you might find that more does are missed. So there'd be more of a second rut expressed. So there's reasons for that second rut. It just takes a little common sense to figure it out, but I'm hunting that second rut in the morning too. And really bedding areas, hunting in the morning, if you go there in the afternoon, they're there. People say, well, how's it a morning stand? What's that even mean? It means that you're sitting in a stand that you can, here's food, here's old buck bedding. You can get around that food source and get to a stand location. Maybe you come in from the opposite side, get to a stand location. Opposite side, maybe you go around this way, get to it. And you're getting into that bedding area. Winds are blowing this way to this stand, this way to this stand, this way to this. Get the picture. You're on that outside edge. You're not in the middle of the buck bedding area. You get into that middle or the edge of that thicket. What's really cool is you can express a lot of miles within a short period of time in a short area. And chances are he'll go by all those stands, maybe in some of those active mornings too. So it's not picking your favorite stand and which stand is best for the wind. Go sit on the edge of that bedding area, get in around the food source so you're not spooking deer in the morning, and wait for them to come back to you if you have that depth of cover. So I'm going to hunt all season long. I'm going to hunt with the weather. I'm going to do an end around, wait for those deer to come back to me. In those bedding area sits, always looking for where's this next great bedding area sit that I can get into, where I can hunt on the edge of a downwind blocker, meaning I can get right up on the edge of that bedding area and the scent is being managed by blowing into a steep grade. Maybe it's dropping off a cliff, a waterway, a horse pasture, cow pasture, a cut ag field where there's nothing out there. Last year I sat in a water hole where it's a post-daybreak stand entrance where you're going through the field 400 yards, walking right through the middle of the field, going in, sitting in a water hole, blowing your scent back at the field, and you're walking in after daylight when the deer are out of the field. So it might be 15 minutes after shooting light or right at shooting light. You can tell nothing's out there. You walk right into your stand, blow your scent out into the field. However, in a case like that, I might sit till 3 in the afternoon and then get out because my scent's blown out in that field where deer might be downwind to me because it's getting dark at 6 and they're getting out there about 3 hours before. So I go sit somewhere else. That might be right on the edge of a bedding area. The point is you're hunting those bedding areas when you feel you can get in and out without spooking deer, and then you're using something downwind of you while you're in that bedding area or on the edge of it to block it while you're sitting there. So I love hunting these bedding areas. It's the most active time of the year for bucks to move around. They do move, and they are weather influenced. You just have to look at the negatives of fog, thunderstorms, snowstorms, high temps, high winds to know when they don't move. Obviously that means there's going to be a boom or bust. They're missing feeding opportunities. They want to feed more. So when to hunt a bedding area? Very, very soon compared to when this video comes out. So Dylan, did I miss anything?
No, that sounds great.
Dylan he's gotten a lot of questions lately, and we start getting a lot of questions, but it's one of the best opportunities to kill a buck, every single year.
What do you have, okay, just to expand on some discussion here, if you were going to hunt public land and you wanted to identify these layers of bedding, how intrusive would you be on a quote-unquote rutcation, and how would you proceed, to hunt that then?
So what I really like is when you go down to Ohio, some of the areas I think of that were really hot, they're adjacent to clear-cut areas. So I'm looking at that clear-cut is really cool because in an otherwise open, mature hardwood setting where there's not a lot of diversity, that means lack of diversity equals lack of food. So I'm going I want to relate to that clear cut area, and then I want to count back from there. So let's say there's a clear cut here, and then I'm going down a hollow, up the other side, and then there's this really cool saddle system where it's a low point in the ridge, and it's just an X of deer movement where if deer, they're not going to go up the steep face of the ridge, they're just going to go through the saddle, they can come from the sides, it forms an X of movement, and it's not 100 yards away from the clear cut because then I might be too close and spooking deer when I go in, but it's in that sweet spot of a quarter mile away, 500 yards away, 600 yards away, and I'm using that terrain feature. Maybe it's a creek system or drainage system or river or swamp edge that is 500 yards back from a clear cut or a half mile. Well, bucks, if they're cruising through that area, they're going to be pinched along the side of that swamp. They're not going through the wet swamp out there where they can't get through. They're swimming. Same with the river system. Maybe there's a highway or there's neighborhoods nearby or something where it's pinching deer movement. Then I'm looking for those established funnels within that zone of around a quarter mile, 600 miles, 800, or 400 yards, 600 yards, 800 yards away from that food source. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So first identify a food source, then find your movement.
Your funnel.
Yeah, your funnel.
And you can find that all from the air.
Mm-hmm.
You're just looking, makes sense that bucks would be in this distance from this food source. And it might be that your food sources are a distant neighborhood, like where we hunted down in Ohio. If you're getting a half mile to 3/4 mile away back from houses that have big yards and food plots and bait piles, and you're coming in the opposite direction and you're waiting for the bucks to come back to you, that could be a very sweet spot that helps you narrow down 20,000 acres to about 40 acres of where to sit. So
love it.
Yeah. Anyways, hunt a bedding area. It's that time of year, and have fun with it. Yeah, I really appreciate you watching all the way to the end. Your followers really appreciate and taking the time. I wanted to mention we have our last minute food plots you can check out at Pure Wildlife Blends. We have a lot of different seed varieties, especially our fall power greens. We have ways to establish clover this time of year, rye, a lot of different goodies. We also have our client visits. We've already started scheduling for this year, December through next August. So there's 5 of us going to client properties. Make sure you check that out. And then finally, our books and web classes. They're great Christmas presents this time of year is when they really start to sell. So really appreciate you watching. Just check out Whitetail Habitat Solutions or for this food plot seed company, purewildlifeblends.com. Thank you.